the roles that were mentioned, kids like being a project manager, being the coder and whatnot, oftentimes in schools, it's like, well, you have to sample all of the roles and do a little bit at all of them rather than specialize in one area. And I personally find value in cultivating individualized expertise. So I'm wondering if you were to kind of do some of this stuff in a classroom where there are like sets of standards or expectations of everybody coming out falsely as being or knowing the same thing, what might you do or navigate, or how might you like speak to an administrator with those kinds of expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I can say from actually studying other organizations, I'm thinking in particular of one organization I've studied. It's a youth media organization, youth filmmaking organization in Chicago called Free Spirit Media. They focus on youth kind of making both documentary as well as kind of PSA films and, narrative or reporting. What they do in a couple of their programs that I studied is that they'll have every kid cycle through in the first semester every role involved in the production team. So, whether it's being the overall project manager, being the cinematographer, doing editing, doing pre-production, everyone has to cycle through all of those roles. And then in the second semester, they choose to specialize and go deep in one of them. And so I think that there is a lot of value, both from an empathy standpoint, to have to cycle through all those roles, as well as from a skills and outcome standpoint, so that everyone kind of does get a taste of everything. And then the kind of agency that can come from going very, very deep. And I think that's very applicable to things like game design or app development or other forms of project-based CS work.
Yeah. And then the way I've handled this in terms of work in schools, because I have run Global Kids programming like as a class when we would do community school partnerships, navigating those is always tricky and challenging. Students also have very different expectations of what happens in a school day versus what happens outside of school.
Right.
One way that we did that was we would have sort of mini challenges where kids could sort of see a project through or see small projects through and complete many roles, and then a sort of deeper project where then they would kind of specialize. So everyone would get a chance to see what it was like to use the software that we used for the coding of the location-based game design was Tailblazer. So they could see how to code in Tailblazer, how to draw some artwork, how to write a little story, and then afterwards pick what they wanted. So very similar to what Rafi's saying, where you get a taste of everything, so you get that real deep, rich exposure, and then you can go deep on what you care about and what you like to do and build your identity that way.
Yeah, I did that with programming languages in the classes I facilitated. So like we'd spend some time in Scratch, then in Sonic Pi using Ruby, and then doing Swift, and then doing JavaScript. And then after that, it was, all right, pick whatever you want, whatever is more in alignment with what you're interested in exploring. And then they could dive deep into that thing. And then they'd often kind of jump between the languages and whatnot. This excerpt was from podcast number 21 of the CSK8 podcast, which was titled The CS Visions Framework, an Equity-Centered Computing Education with Rafi Santo and Sara Vogel. You can listen to the full episode as well as hundreds more by searching for the CSK8 podcast on your favorite podcast app.